A way that I love plant medicine is that it shows you who you are, and it shows you the blocks that's blocking you from who you are. The point of the plant ceremonies is not to rely on it, but it shows you information, it shows you truth of what's going on, and that gives you a pathway to be able to then integrate it into your life. Once you see information, you can't unsee it. We can never erase our past, but we can change the way we relate to it. If someone wants to have that personal growth and is looking for a next step, then I think it's an amazing tool to use to expand our consciousness.
Hello and welcome to Curious Ones podcast by Yandara. I'm Yael Ginzburg, the host of the podcast, a yoga and meditation teacher and philosophy lover. Each week you will hear eye-opening interviews with the different teachers of the Yandara Yoga Institute located in beautiful Baja, Mexico, along with other teachers that pass through here. This life-changing knowledge shared through authentic, heartfelt communication will help you live a happier, more fulfilled, and connected life. Let's dive in. Hello, welcome back to Curious Ones podcast by Yandara. I'm Yael Ginzburg, and today I have the incredible Dinsmore with me, and is an advanced teacher here at Yandara. She's been here for many, many years, and just a wealth of information, knowledge, wisdom. I love speaking with her. I love her as a person. So I'm really looking forward to this. Welcome to the podcast, Anne.
Thanks, Yael. I'm very happy to be back and so happy that you're here again.
Me too. I love being here. Just immediately I step off of the shuttle and I feel so calm and connected and at home.
Yes.
So today we have a little bit of a spicy topic. And has a lot of experience with meditation just as a practice and also in relation to psychedelics and the combination of the both. And I am super curious about it. I would love to pick your brain and explore these topics more. So let's dive in. Let's start by hearing about your process. How did this world reveal itself to you? What has been your experience so far? What are you curious about in this exploration?
Well, I guess it all started about 10 years ago when I had an experience. I was actually an atheist, and then I had an experience when I was meditating. I was being guided in a meditation, and I had an experience where I disappeared. So I felt like I no longer existed, and yet at the same time I felt like I was one with everything. And that really changed my life, because then I was no longer an atheist. So it was like a big 180.
Yeah. And just to be clear, that was with no external...
Nothing external, no plants, no substances, just meditating. So that's how I was introduced. And after that happened, it became something, it didn't feel like a choice, like I had a choice anymore. It felt like I had to pay attention to this and explore this kind of new life. And so I did change my life. I moved down here because at that time I was only here for a yoga teacher training. It was my first time I came to Yandara. And then I just felt that call, had to come back. And just to keep exploring this lifestyle and what else there was to life. Because before that even I was feeling fairly uncertain about life. Like, why am I here? What is all of this? And so I was asking, I was opening that door, the invitation for source or spirit to, I was curious and I was asking for it through these questions. And so that was revealed to me through my meditation. And then I started a meditation practice, like Vipassana based, so a lot to do with sensations. So paying attention to the sensations in my body and feeling, transforming them, so alchemizing them. And so it's not a purely Vipassana practice, because Vipassana really does eliminate the story from everything. Whereas I would do that practice of just being with the sensations in my body. But then I also added at times, when it felt like it was the time for it, I would add in things like shadow work or the inner child work. And that would be the process of alchemy. So using our abundance of love to change the way we relate to the sensations or the stories going on in ourselves to find more wholeness, because the answer is always love. It's always love, and that's what alchemy is all about, is finding the truth of the sensations or the experience through giving it more love, and that creates the wholeness within our being, and it allows us to relate to our sensations differently, because oftentimes we have sensations and we'll label them as good or bad, when really it's just information. It's neither good or bad, but it's up to us to decide what we do with those sensations. And so through this process with like the different shadow works or inner child work, it's about just relating to those differently. It's like we have, because I can explain it a little bit deeper, like of what that process actually is. So we have our brain is wired in a certain way, and our neural patterns become ingrained in us the more we live in whatever reality those neural pathways are guiding us. And so I like to think of it, the analogy is like tracks in snow. So they're really ingrained, and it can be really hard to steer out of those tracks. But then when we do shadow work or the inner child work, it's like we reactivate our normal neural pathways that we're used to going down. And then when we bring love into that situation or find wholeness through like things like reparenting or the inner child work, then it's like we have those tracks, and then we've created new tracks beside it. So we're able to steer off of those ingrained tracks. So yeah, we have those tracks. And then when we do the work like the reparenting and the inner child work, it allows us to relate to those situations differently and give ourselves what we needed in that situation through love. It's always through love. The answer is always through love. I think that was the message of the first podcast I did with you. I tell people they don't even have to listen to it. The answer is love. That's the outcome of that podcast.
But make sure you listen to it. It's a great one.
It's a nice one.
Yeah.
And so when we do that, we create those new pathways. And so it allows us we can never erase our past, but we can change the way we relate to it. And if we don't change the way we relate to our traumas or things that have happened in our lives, then we just keep living in those old patterns and tracks. So for anyone who is interested in the personal growth, which I know a lot of people are.
Especially the listeners of this podcast.
Right? It's all about love and finding more wholeness in those moments that we had when we were younger, mostly. Giving ourselves the love that we needed in those moments, and then it allows us to relate to those moments differently. And so those old neural patterns, the reason why they're there is they're trying to keep us safe. They're trying to keep us in old known habits, old known patterns, because newness is terrifying to part of our brain, and it would rather keep us stuck in old known patterns than allow us to experience something new, even if it's something beautiful and good for us. So the way we can do that is through love, is through finding that wholeness. And so the more sometimes we have to revisit sensations more than once to really change those neural pathways, because they are ingrained in us. So the more we do this work, then the more the new neural pathways are strengthened. And then eventually the system realizes, I'm safe. I don't need to keep going down those old tracks. I can steer onto the new tracks, and it's preferable, because those new tracks that we make, when we do that with love, like how we create those new tracks is with love, the new tracks are leading us closer to home within ourselves, to spirit. And so it's like we're driving down a certain pathway, then we all of a sudden get to drive down a different pathway, which brings us back to source within ourselves.
That makes so much sense to me in a few different levels, because really it's about becoming more familiar with that sensation of love and trust and stability or safety. There's a concept, like when you hear about marketing, people buy from people they know. It's more about familiarity than about
even the quality of the work. So that's why advertisers make sure to put themselves in front of people a lot of times, so that when they see the product in the store, in a way it already feels familiar, and there's like maybe even a false sense of trust with it, and you're more inclined to buy that product just because you've seen it more times. So that just shows about like the sociology and psychology behind the human mind. And it works in the same way. The more you become familiar with that sensation, or even that experience with the addition of love added to it, the more familiar it is, the safer it is, and the more inclined you would be to allow yourself to get out of the known into like the new known.
Definitely. The process of trusting our hearts, because in the past, like when we had been hurt in the past, it's oftentimes when we are in a heart space. And so, we're vulnerable, we're open, and then something happens to us, and our parent says no in a certain way that affects us, or a partner later on in life does something that, shuts us down. And so even our psyche can view it as dangerous to be living from the heart space. So the more we do this work, the more, like you're saying, there's a safety that comes with that. And not only a safety, but like a purpose, like a fullness in life that's expansive, like exponentially expansive. So the more we can move from our heart space and listen to our hearts, then that's going to guide us to what we as human beings are actually on the deepest level searching for, which is to return back to source. And we can even I love Maslow's hierarchy of needs, even like this kind of more modern psychology, you could say, also highlights that, is that our deepest desire is self-actualization, or self-realization.
It's true.
So and a lot of people in today's age are searching for that, which is different than the past, because our Maslow's hierarchy of needs, our basic needs are being met more and more as humans.
True.
Obviously not in all parts of the world, but in many parts of the world. And so there's more of a collective goal going on, where a lot of people have those, and they are searching for the more. So this is one of the ways that we can do that, and really it's actually clearing our karmas, because our emotional patterning, so those tracks that I was saying, it's basically our karmas. And so the reason why those tracks are there, and why we're programmed that way when we're kids, is because we come onto this earth with like a little suitcase of karma, and then through our childhood, so before puberty, situations arise that allow our karmas that we come onto this earth with to be placed into this world through difficult situations when we're kids. Could be little things, could be big things. And then what happens is we have, so that's our karma being laid out. And then we hit puberty, and that's when we have our, could say we become adults in a certain way. So our inner masculine and feminine split. And then according to yoga, it is our jobs in this lifetime to reunite the inner masculine and feminine, and and that will lead us to self-actualization, illumination. And so how we do that, how we reunite the inner masculine and feminine, is by doing this work, this alchemizing work of revisiting, or you could say re-experiencing or understanding our karmas that were put into place, and that, like I said, those show up as our traumas, big T or little t. It could be big events, it could be something so small as, one of my things was kindergarten teacher, roll up my sleeves, kindergarten teacher, and she just like, use your words, and it's just like, whoa. And that just really, I would say that's a little T trauma, because it wasn't something very big that happened, but I internalized it a certain way that was traumatic for me, that influenced the rest of my life.
You don't realize it at the moment, or even as an adult, you don't realize it. But when you do this work, you start to realize, like, why would that specific memory stick with me all these years later? And you start to look into that and understand how you interpreted that situation and how it affects you still to this day.
Definitely. So we talked about memories, like memories coming up, but when doing shadow work or inner child work, sometimes the memories aren't there, because if our body is not in a state of like safety enough to be remembering those situations, then it won't be accessible. So there are different ways we can do that without recalling memories. But then often what happens is as we do the work, even without the memories, as our system realizes that it's safer and safer, then oftentimes our memories are unlocked because our system realizes I'm in a safe enough place now to address those things.
Right. Beautiful. I think that was a very in-depth and interesting. Of course, there's a lot more to go into in the world of meditation, but that was a really great, let's say, introduction and opening into your path and the path of meditation. Could you go into the side of psychedelics now?
Sure.
And maybe even in relation to meditation?
Yeah, like to me, they're very inseparable. So how has my meditation practice helped me in understanding plant medicines and different experiences with the psychedelics? So when we have psychedelic experiences, oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes we'll see things or feel things, or a combination of both. Some people just feel, some people see and feel. Sometimes it can be really difficult to interpret what we see. Sometimes it can be very abstract images, or sometimes just colors, or sometimes pretty like interesting things, almost like dream world, where you're like, why did I have this dream? Like there's like different odd components that we're maybe not understanding fully of why they're there. And
because
so,
the rational mind doesn't understand.
Yeah.
Like
why did I see a snail in my trip? You know, why did I see a snail like getting stuck on something? Like, what is that trying to do? And so one thing that so our mind will try to rationalize it, but our mind can only take us so far because it's a great tool, but it's not where answers are found.
No.
It's great at processing things, but it's not where answers are found. Answers are found within our body and within our hearts.
Yeah, beyond the mind.
And so when integrating psychedelic experiences, for me, it's very much about sensation. So that's why I have this practice before I even met the world of psychedelics and plant medicines, was very much based already in the sensations and eliminating the story.
The meditation aspect of it.
The meditation aspect.
Before you go into the integration, could you share a little bit about how this world opened up to you? How did you start exploring it?
Yeah, I felt like I was at kind of like a real block in my life. I felt like my meditation practice was bringing me a lot of fulfillment and joy and understanding, but I felt that I don't know, it's just like it's inner knowing that there was a block there. Like I was very aware of all my patterns that I felt were not helpful for me, but I felt like I was at a block of like how to create those new tracks. It felt like I could talk about things, I could feel, but there was something that I was like just observing but unable to change. And so then I got the opportunity to join an ayahuasca ceremony. And I was very scared at first because, it's just something new and something, very deep. And so after my first ceremony, it was like my whole world had changed. I had been sober for a long time, but then I kind of fell back into old patterns with some substance abuse. Not terrible, but it was there. And after the ayahuasca, I couldn't touch anything else. There was no more desire, because during that first experience, a way that I love what ayahuasca is there's lots of ways you can describe that, but one of them that was shared with me was that it shows you who you are. And that's what happened, and it shows you the blocks that's blocking you from who you are.
So hard to see those sometimes.
It can be a very tumultuous process.
It's for the brave of heart, for sure.
Yeah, the light warriors, and before every ceremony, I always say a little prayer of whoever's with us, of like, thank you for being here, and thank you for working on ourselves, understanding ourselves, because something else the medicine has shown me very clearly is that any work that we do on ourselves individually affects everybody globally, especially the people who are close to us, the people who share our blood, the people who we have the most energetic connections to. And so yeah, that's how I met the world of plant medicine, and I just fell in love. And it felt like my meditation practice before that was like, for me at least, this perfect way of understanding the medicine and able to bring it into my life. Because if you have ceremonies and you don't have a way of integrating it, then
and awareness,
and the awareness, then what is the point? The point of the plant ceremonies, plant medicine, is not to rely on it, but it shows you information, it shows you truth of what's going on, and that gives you a pathway to be able to then integrate it into your life. So yeah, one without the other is kind of pointless.
To the person who doesn't really know what ayahuasca is, in what way the ceremony is performed, that is in a ceremony or should be in a ceremony, give us a little bit of a background, because I only found out once I started traveling and hearing about it, especially in this area of the world. The origin of it also would be interesting to hear about.
Yeah, I think there's many different ways that people can what a ceremony is to each person, and there's lots of different lineages that will organize ceremonies in different ways and have different kind of recommendations around the ceremonies. But they, for the most part, I mean, to allow the medicine to work its greatest, to its greatest potential, is having a clean body. So that's usually pretty similar. So, eliminating certain things from your diet for a period of time before, at least.
Let's start even like it's a plant.
Okay, it's a plant. It's a vine.
Like some people don't know what ayahuasca is at all.
It's a vine from the jungle.
Okay. Amazon, right?
Yep, the Amazonian jungles.
Yeah.
And then it's prepared. There's different ways of preparing it, but basically it's the vine, the leaves often, like the whole plant, and then it's cooked, it's brewed, and then there's different types of vines, there's different colors of vines, there's different effects of the different vines. So there's like just like marijuana, there's different strains. It's the same with ayahuasca. There's different strains, and then it's brewed, and then when you have a ceremony, you'll have somebody who's serving you the medicine, and you get it served to you in a certain dose, and the person who's serving it, they'll know how much to give you, or kind of how that goes, and then you often take the first serving, and it's so dependent on the person of how quickly it works. The experience there, how much is needed, is dependent on each individual person. And a journey usually lasts about 3 to 4 hours. And oftentimes in the ceremonies, you can be served 2 or 3 times, is very common. So it can last anywhere from 3 to 4 hours to 8 hours to 12 hours, just depending on what that ceremony is or how it's being served. It's a little bit hard to speak to kind of different things around the ceremonies, because different lineages do it differently. So I always encourage for people to find where they feel more comfortable, because sometimes ceremonies can be more relaxed, sometimes they can be more strict, but with any psychedelic, like, comfort is so important. Comfort and safety are so important. So finding something that feels comfortable and supportive to each person is really important.
There's music.
Oh, there's music. Yeah, there's music, live music. So the songs, the shamans or the people serving the medicine, they often have a lot of practice of how to understand and how to work with the medicine. It's like a communication. It's a relationship that is cultivated with the plant. So as somebody learns, like any relationship, learns more how to communicate. How is the medicine speaking to you? How does it speak to you? Then you can start to channel it and understand the messages much more clear. And so with the music, oftentimes the people who are facilitating or providing the music for the ceremony, they've channeled messages from the plants, and then through their voice, through their song, through their instruments, become a channel for the medicine to be expressed through music. And music is so important in ceremonies and in life in general, because it opens the heart. You know, it allows us to touch on something that's not so tangible, like kind of like poetry.
Right.
So there's often live music, sometimes also canned music, you know, radio, like Spotify music playlist, medicine playlist.
Really?
Yeah. Of people of Icaros, they're called Icaros, the channeled songs or channeled music from people who have, when they're on their experiences with ayahuasca. And so sometimes they're recorded and then played in the ceremonies as well. But it's a heart opening music.
Beautiful. And what has been your experience while taking the medicine? What has been revealed to you? Are there any transformations that you remember having? I would love to hear about what happens to a person that goes through this process.
I'll speak more about kind of my experience with it, because from witnessing people in ceremony, everyone has different experiences. So I'll speak to mine, but there's definite like common undertones that are happening for people with ayahuasca. And ayahuasca also is the active ingredient is the DMT, so it's a DMT psychedelic.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, kind of the information that I've received, probably get emotional talking about it, because it's really changed my life totally. I think the biggest thing that's like coming up right now around that is that it showed me who I am, like my spirit. So if I were to remove my mind from my being, which is our mind is like our governor, that dictates the capacity of our experience in relationship to the experience of our spirit. And so the more we can purify the mind through many different practices, the more we realize who we really are. We realize our spirit, because that's our truest essence, is our spirit. And so I think that's the biggest gift that ayahuasca has given me, is allowed me to be in experience, not just a knowing, but be in a physical, somatic experience of my spirit. And it's the most beautiful thing that I've ever experienced. I've had similar experiences with just meditating. Yeah, so it's different, kind of like with the meditation, and it's beautiful as well. Extremely beautiful. I would say it's more potent. Without the medicine, the experience of the true self is more potent. Because it's I don't know how to describe it, but it's just more in the earth. It's a more grounded experience. Well, with ayahuasca, it helps to create those neural pathways we were talking about. It kind of like forces...
What an important connection, yeah.
It forces those neural pathways, because our mind can be really tough. It can be really hard to change.
Stuck in its ways.
Yeah. And so the medicine can really help to just create those initial neural pathways. And then it's our job after the ceremonies to strengthen those new pathways.
Yeah. So
for me, that's been one of the most profound things, is that it's given me the experience of my true self. And so something from that is it's given me so much hope. That is a possibility, is to exist in that way, in my human form on this earth, without anything, without any medicine. And it's my job to do that. Like so that was a very beautiful ceremony where this happened. I mean, each ceremony is different depending on what we need in that moment. The information that the spirit of ayahuasca decides is what we need. So I've also had ceremonies that are very difficult, like I said, it shows you who you are and what stops you from being who you are. So in the moments where I've had the experiences of what is stopping me, it can feel very difficult and terrible to see yourself, because it's also truth. So to see the truth of the cause and effects of our actions. In one ceremony, I was just like, Anne, you're a piece of shit, you know, like, not that I'm a piece of shit, but just realizing, like, really seeing the truth of, like, these are where you live in illusion. This is where your mind is still stuck in Maya, in illusion. And to, like, again, experience that very physically, those feelings that are not in line with truth, in line with spirit, are karmas. There are karmas. And so to see the truth of them has been very difficult at times, but also maybe even more of a blessing than seeing my true self or experiencing my true self, because those are the tangible things that we can work with to then allow our spirit to live more fully on the surface of our being. So it's definitely a mix of things. But even I would say that it's never been like a bad trip. There's been difficult trips, but it's just because it's showing me a truth that my subconscious has maybe kept away from me, or I haven't been aware of. So it allows the subconscious to really come to the forefront as ways of giving something tangible to work with to eliminate illusion. Nothing is either good or bad experiences. We can put the label on it as something positive or negative, but it's simply, like I said, with the meditation, it's just information. And then it's up to us to decide what we're going to do with that information.
Okay. So just a step before we get into that, what we do with that information. When we talk about psychedelics, ayahuasca is just one example. Can you expand and explain a little bit about the other possibilities, plants, medicines that are out there?
So my experience is mostly with ayahuasca, with marijuana, or I'll call her Santa Maria, and mushrooms or psilocybin. The ayahuasca is DMT, mushrooms are psilocybin, marijuana is THC. So they have different effects. They work in different ways. I also have some experience, but not very much, with mescaline. So that's another psychedelic, or I actually found out another word the other day called I want to make sure it's right. It's called an endogen. It's not the right word. I actually kind of want to look it up right now. But it's a different word other than psychedelic, and because we also have psychedelics that are man-made.
Right.
And so the entheogen. The entheogens guide us to spirit. So they have a spirit, because they're from the earth. They're natural. They're sentient.
Yeah. They're plants.
They're plants.
Yeah.
Created by, spirit, part of this whole thing,
right.
not man-made.
Yeah.
And so they do affect us in different ways, because there's simply different substances. Specifically how the DMT works, because I do have much more experience with DMT, and also another one that has DMT is also Changa, is something else I've used as a growth tool as well. And how DMT specifically works is we have natural DMT in our being. Now, our natural DMT is released throughout our life. It's released when we're born, like the most profoundly when we're born, when we die, when women are giving birth, there can be DMT released.
Which is the portal of life and death.
Yes, yeah, DMT is this. It's like the portal of life and death. And it can also be released naturally in us in large quantities when we meditate. So because when we meditate, a natural effect of that is ego death, or part of our personality. You could even say our traumas. The ego is very involved in our traumas, and so it allows, when we meditate and we allow ourselves to enter more into the present moment where truth exists only, it allows us to feel truth, which counters the ego often. And so it's like little mini ego deaths when we meditate and have those moments, if you've ever been meditating and had an aha moment, that's like a very tiny ego death. And so
because when you're in ego, you're in separation. When you're feeling connected to the one, you're by definition not feeling separation.
Yeah, the oneness.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, I'm quickly interrupting the episode to extend an invitation. If you are interested in deepening into any of the subjects we talk about on the podcast, we offer many different experiences on our beautiful grounds here in Baja, Mexico. From 9-day modules such as sound healing and yoga nidra, to breath and meditation, as well as 200 or 300-hour yoga teacher trainings, and many different shorter retreats. Check out our website yandara.com to see all the information about the different experiences. Let's get back to the episode.
So the more we can meditate and enter into the space of truth or the present moment, it's like those little mini ego deaths, and the more we do that, the more we are in that space, then the more DMT will have accessible to us, because it's also called the God molecule as well. So it can also be released with people who meditate more and more. That's why I had those experiences without any substances, is because I was developing, like very dedicated to developing my meditation practice. And it just became accessible through those open spaces, through those present moments, just like, wow, this is what life is, you know.
Where does LSD fall in there?
Okay, LSD. What is the molecule? I forget the plant that it's mimicking. It's mimicking something.
But is it man-made?
Yes, LSD is man-made.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I know so many people who have had life-changing experiences on LSD. One of my very close people to me had a very tumultuous life, and then one day she was using a lot of LSD, and then one day with her LSD trip, she realized God. She could see, you know, the grid that's here, the energetic grid that connects everything and everything. And from that moment on, she stopped using all substances, because she found something more to live for. She found God or source, and then so she started living in that way. So like I always feel that whatever substance we're going to choose to use, is there's always information there. And so some people really, for me, LSD, I'm not a huge fan of it. You know, I've had some trips, and to me, the much more useful trips were with plants. But I don't want to speak for everybody, because some people really have had extremely profound experiences on LSD. And I actually have had very profound experiences on LSD, but I find that there's more of a completion of something, like because of maybe a spirit, you know, the spirit of the plant, where I feel more held, as opposed to kind of left up, I would say, like with LSD or even MDMA can also be like a psychedelic trip.
MDMA is one that I have tried, but it's a rough one. It like lifts you so high up, but the crash after is unbearable.
Yeah, for me, I just don't even touch anything that's man-made at this point. I've had experience with LSD and with lots with MDMA, and I'm not going to say it's a waste. Like no. I don't regret anything that happened. Like it definitely opened portals, but for me, from what I know, hindsight's always 20/20, right? Is for me, if anyone ever came to me looking for something like plants, I would never recommend a man-made substance. I would always, you know, would recommend a plant, because of the spirit that's there, because the spirit comes in and holds you.
Yeah. I think that's because of your experience with meditation. You have cultivated a connection and a conversation or communication with spirit. And when you have that awareness and kind of that knowing in your body, or familiarity with the sensation of being connected to spirit, or being spirits just, you can be more subtle or more aware of the subtleties of when spirit is involved or in your experience, and when you're not so much connected to that world.
And I think, like you said, the down, like the crash, I'm not going to say there's not a crash with with plant medicine, but it's different.
In what way?
To me, after I would do something like LSD or MDMA, I feel very low. Like, you know, as the substance is leaving the body, it's like I just really kind of don't want to live. It's like pretty terrible. But then with the plants, it's more of like, for me, like an emotional exhaustion as opposed to something so chemical, like physical, like physiological, like the substance leaving. And that crash, it's more like, so I wouldn't even call it a crash with the plant medicine. I would call it more of just like a processing. It's a processing of the experience.
Yeah, and I can relate to that totally with what you say in relation to like the emotional exhaustion that comes after like doing inner child work or deep emotional subconscious excavation work. You feel that emotional exhaustion, but it really, after you're able to process that experience, you feel that you have integrated another part of yourself, and it was worth it, let's say, which I didn't feel with MDMA, but I was also taking it like recreationally, not in ceremony or anything like that.
Yeah, me too, because I also know, like, so that's also my experience with the man-made psychedelics is recreationally, as opposed to, like, I hear also so many people who use these substances in a more clinical setting, you could say, like with therapists, and they have incredible results. So I don't ever want to say like good, bad, yes or no.
Yeah.
But for me, that's been my experience around it.
Okay. I think we're ready to go into integration, or is there anything else we should say before that?
The plant medicines are amazing for, first of all, if you're feeling called to it, you know, and you want to, like, that's usually the gateway to it. I would never push it on anybody or say, I think you should need this, or I think you should want that, because it's very much like a personal relationship of a calling. Because if somebody is interested in self-growth and self-development, and then this, you know, these psychedelics, these plant medicines come into awareness, then that can be like a calling for them. But it's something that I don't think is for everybody necessarily, because it is like once you see information, you can't unsee it. And so there is like a necessary integrating part of it. Yeah, like I'm not being like, you know, psychedelics are the answer. You know, it's like very much like if someone wants to have that personal growth and is looking for a next step, then I think it's an amazing tool to use to expand our consciousness, but also not something, you know, it's beautiful and it's wonderful. It also will require you to change, because when you see what you see, you know, there's an option to either ignore it or not. And it's, in my experience, it's fairly hard to ignore. But it's beautiful, you know, that the medicines are showing you how to become more whole within your spirit, how to live more from your spirit, from your heart.
Wow. Is there something that, or of course there are, but what are things that people should be aware of or cautious of even? Is there certain situations where you don't believe, and of course we're not doctors or even therapists, we're speaking about our experience and what we've seen so far, or what you've seen. You have more experience than I do. I'm just a curious student, and feel definitely this call that I really want to explore this world. And I'm waiting for the right circumstances and situations. But what should be the things that people should be cautious of? Are there certain circumstances that you wouldn't even recommend going down this path?
I kind of find that a hard question to answer. Because I don't have experience with many different lineages. Just a couple. I think what I found helpful, so again, I'll speak from my experience as opposed to maybe shoulds or shouldn'ts, but what I found to be really important is trust. Like, to the person who introduced me to the plant world, I trusted this person, and therefore I trusted that they were bringing me into a safe environment. And so to me, that could be one of like something to that could be important is like, who is serving the medicine, like.
And I think that's connected to like, because we do hear about bad trips, and I think from what I've heard, it's connected to not feeling safe in that environment.
Yeah, because the plant itself, and even sometimes it's so interesting, even sometimes I've had a ceremony where I didn't necessarily feel like held, or I was kind of preoccupied with external things going on. But even then, the information that I received through my relationship to those feelings were infinitely helpful. Like just kind of seeing, well, safety is actually, unless there's an actual physical danger outside of me, safety is also a relationship to the present moment and a relationship to ourselves. So even when I had that experience, it was so insightful to see how can I cultivate more safety within myself, because I'm physically safe.
Yeah.
So why am I feeling, maybe uncomfortable or something like this?
Yeah. I think also another important thing to mention is your approach or intention. I find that now you see these plants and medicines showing up a lot more commonly. And I think maintaining this reverence to the tradition and the plant and the wisdom and the spirit and the ceremony of it is really important. Can you expand on that?
There are different lineages. And so some lineages are more laid back. Some are more strict with like certain rituals. That's why I talked about earlier about just finding a fit for you. Like I've been in a ceremony that it was very rigid. Sit up, don't lay down, don't talk. Like very like,
Some people need that.
Some people need that. That's why I'm saying some people like this, some people it works. The ceremonies that I've been more attracted to and that work better for me are a little bit more laid back. Outside, around a fire, allowed to lay down, allowed to sit up. But always the reverence to the medicine is important. So one of the, like, in the ceremonies that I really enjoy, you're allowed to express physically, you're allowed to express vocally. Just the rule is not to interrupt other people's, like not to talk. If we're both in a ceremony, not to be like, hey, yeah, what's going, like, how are you doing? Like, what's going on with
happening
you?
with her, really.
Yeah. And so to allow to be in your own space and allowed to express in any way you want, but not directly speaking to the other participants. And to me, a lot of the reverence comes around attitude and intention. So with these different lineages of how, some lineages, they're like, there's something, you're having a difficult time, just have some ayahuasca, just have some ayahuasca, go and sit and meditate, whereas others, it's much more prepared, a preparation time where you're going to sit and really focus. So that's why it's a little bit, when I hear like traditional ayahuasca ceremony, it's like, what is traditional ayahuasca ceremony? What lineage are you speaking to? Because even then there's a lot of, because there's so many being offered, like you said, it's becoming more popular. There's going to be people, it's like a wolf in a sheep suit, so somebody can put on the pretty outfit, somebody can have the instruments and play a tambour with feathers going on and everything, but what is the energy of the person? To me, the energy of the person is so important, because when you open yourself up with these plants, you're opening up your energetic field. So the person who is going to be taking care of you, to me, their energy is so important.
And allowed into your field.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people who claim to be spiritual healers, or even believe themselves truly to be spiritual healers, I'm thinking of our mutual friend, really have so much going on that they're so not aware of. So using your own discernment in that moment, I think, is so important.
I totally agree. And also, with that being said, it's like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So even if like people are so multidimensional, somebody can have like a vibration within themselves that's so beautiful and so like like a high vibration, and at the same time be living in their human experience of pain and suffering. And and so like unless you can find like a fully illumined being, to be holding the ceremonies for you, like, so for me that would be someone like Buddha or Jesus who has completely eliminated their karma and they just live in the vibe of love. I think that's pretty hard to find nowadays.
But there's like levels.
But there's levels of it, yeah. So yeah, if we're humans, we can live more from our hearts, from our spirit, or we can live more from our minds, and there's a mix of that can happen, and we can move in and out of these ways. And so it's, to me, something that I look for in a facilitator is really their capacity for love. I think it's one of the most important things, the ability to put aside our own personal pathology for that moment and sit in space and shared connection and say, hey, I'm here for you, I'll hold you. You go to a dark space, I'm going with you because I'm just going to keep holding you. And so I can think of actually some medicine people that I've met who can move in those spaces so beautifully and also can have chaos in their own personal lives, but in those moments that matter, they are boom right there with you.
How do you know?
Through the before maybe meeting them, maybe not knowing. But for me, it's really a feeling, just like following my heart, following my intuition. But definitely for me, like entering into this world, having someone I trusted, have a recommendation, say, hey, these people are. Yeah. Okay, I've had nice experiences with them. To me, that's been really helpful in trusting.
Beautiful. Okay, integration. Because I think that really, as you mentioned, there's a distance or a difference between seeing the knowledge and being to really embody the knowledge. As someone who's doing the work, how does one approach that? Because it can really be a difficult aspect and yet a freeing one as well.
So like any experiences that we have that can change our perception, whether it's plant medicines, whether it's a breathwork session, whether it's a conversation with somebody, when we have kind of these profound experiences that allow us to release some type of control and see in a new way, there's going to be an integration process around that, because in those moments we've created that new neural pathway. And so how that can show up is through, say we have that experience, whatever it is, through plant medicine, talking, breathwork. We have that experience, we get a new perception, a new neural pathway. And how that will show up when we're now going into kind of our more daily life is it will show up through our response or our reaction to our external stimuli. So if we have these experiences and then we go into our world and we continue our lives, what we may notice is that we will feel differently in situations where we felt differently before. So we have a normal way of feeling, relating, and then all of a sudden it's like, ooh, I feel different in relationship to that. So these are the moments where integration is being asked for from yourself. And so how that will show up, so something kind of like a fundamental thing to understand is how our reactions work in our body. And so this is where the wonderful Buddha taught us many years ago that we don't react to the external stimuli. We actually react to the sensations in our bodies from the external stimuli. So for example, and this can be proved in how you and me can have different reactions to the same external stimuli.
Right.
Because we're actually reacting to our relationship to the external stimuli, not to the external stimuli.
Yeah.
And so how that shows up is through a sensation in the body. So there's something external, you say it's scary, I say it's not scary. And so it's all about
both are true.
And both are true. For me, it's true. For you, it's true.
Yeah.
But if we're blaming the external stimuli, one thing is we're taking away our power so greatly, like our power to relate to our external world. And so the idea is we have external stimuli. It creates a sensation in our body based on our mental emotional programming.
So the external stimuli is maybe the plant. The reaction is our understanding.
Not for integration. So this is like this is kind of just like a basic, like a fundamental understanding of how it works when we relate to our external world.
After
in
the
general,
experience?
no, this is just in general. So just like a baseline. This is how our response to things works. Because after we have these moments of, with plant medicine, talking, whatever it is, breath work, where we've changed our perception or received new information that changes the way we think or what we believe, then just talking a little bit about how that works in general, and then how we can, with plant medicine, how that comes in and relates. And so just like kind of a base understanding of how we relate to our external world is we have external stimuli, and then we have a response to it based on our mental emotional programming. And so what happens is external stimuli, we have a sensation. The sensation goes to our brain, and our brain tells us a story about the sensation. So say if it's someone walks in this room and I'm like, whoa, scary. That's like, it's very quick, right? We don't realize that whole process going on. So someone walks in, a sensation will be created in my body, and then a story will be told about it.
Usually it's kind of like a remembering of something that we've experienced before.
Oftentimes. It gets a little weedy because it can also be like the vibration that this person is putting off. What if they've come in to murder me? Kind of an extreme example, but if they come in, but we always have the control. The thing is, we always have the power and the control to choose how we respond to that. So the sensations evoked in the body, and then a story comes in. And depending on our mental emotional programming, it's going to want us to either react to it, hey, get out, you're scary, or suppress, oh, I'm scared. And so suppression or expression are usually the polarities of how we respond to our external stimuli. But there's a third way, and this is what Vipassana meditation teaches us, is that it allows us to allow, when we react to something, our brain thinks in order for that go away, in order for that experience that we're having to lighten or lessen or go away, we either need to express or suppress. Whereas Vipassana teaches us the third way, which is to observe. To just, okay, there's something going on, observe the sensations that are happening in my body. I don't need to express the sensation or suppress it for it to go away. It's going to go away by itself. So it teaches us impermanence, basically. That we don't, if we observe and are with the present moment, that we don't actually have to do anything necessarily to make that go away. We can, based on the situations, decide to leave the situation or engage. But that's, it's just, and that's kind of not important right now. It's more just about like the basis of how we interact with our external world, which is sensation-based.
Super important, because I think that it shows us about kind of like the ways that we react to our environment. And we do have, which is like, right, the fight or flight, or the I guess within the fight or flight, there's like the freeze or the fight. And then there's also a middle ground. Even when you're in the survival mode, or even when you're activated, you can choose between a variety of reactions.
And so how I would say this relates to like a psychedelic experience, and I'll draw on, let's see, what's a good example? Maybe with substance abuse. And so I had an ayahuasca experience, and then as I was integrating that, I was in a party, there's alcohol there, there's drugs there. And before the ayahuasca experience, how I would relate to that situation is, yes, please. And then afterwards, it was like I was confronted in the same situation, and there's a sensation in the body going, no. Just like a tightening sensation, as opposed to like a moving towards sensation. It was a moving away from sensation. And so sometimes that can feel uncomfortable because it's new. For me, it was very welcomed because that was something that I wanted. And so to integrate it is, in that moment, was to listen to the sensation. Okay, back away. But let's see another example. So, and just integration in general is, we'll have these moments. They create the new neural pathways, the moments with the medicines, different things. They create the new neural pathway. We go out into our world and
life goes on.
Life goes on. So we're in the same world that we came from before, and then a certain moment will come up where we relate to it different, and we have a different sensation around it. And so and it usually comes in as a story, like feeling uncomfortable, feeling out of place, let's say. And so it's like, whoa, why am I relating differently to that? And so with integration, one of the key things is mindfulness, just being aware of how we're relating to things. If something comes up, that moment of like, oh, I feel different about this situation. Okay, well, notice that. Oh, mindfulness is extremely powerful. Just becoming aware of what is here and now, instead of just blindly going through life, but being mindful of, oh, this is how I'm feeling right now in this situation. Not necessarily having to do anything about it, but just the awareness of it. Yeah. So we'll have the awareness of a situation after a ceremony.
And I think allowing space for it.
So
once
important.
Sometimes we resist what's happening, but just softening into the reality of what is happening, whatever it is, and observing it and noticing it is a really important part of it.
Yeah, especially right after a ceremony, to have some space can be really important, to sit and be mindful, or sit and meditate, or sit and just be. Create the space to just be without doing, because we have created those new neural pathways. And so after ceremonies, as much time as you can handle, or as much time as your life permits, is to give yourself space with nothing to do, where you can just sit and almost recall the ceremony, relive the ceremony, those sensations, because those will help strengthen the neural pathways. And say if we're doing that in the integration process with that space, if something difficult comes up, a tool to use is that inner child work or the shadow work. Love whatever sensation is there. Can you be like, what is this sensation trying to tell me? Can I love this sensation? Can I, whatever that is, whatever information is there, how can I love it? And that actually helps to strengthen those neural pathways, or change them and gear them towards love, like we were talking about. I think I may have said this in another podcast, but this process of alchemy is very much like the movie Inside Out, with our core emotions are the blue ones. And then when we love those moments that we've had, those blue orbs or those moments of trauma, it's like touching them with gold. And then so that's us changing the way we relate to that core memory of those negative things that have happened to us. And what that does is it increases our ability for compassion for ourselves and for other people. So that's a little bit like what we're doing with that loving process and how it works.
Super incredible movie. I recommend it to anyone. It's like an animated movie, and it's the best. It's about real life.
Real life emotions.
Yeah.
What else for integration? So that's, kind of immediately after. It can be really nice to create the space just to be and to feel, listen to the music that was played. Medicine music can help to kind of recall that and recall whatever your experience was with the ceremony. And then just find ways to love it, because it often does bring up uncomfortable sensations as we're integrating anything new. And so to have that practice of loving the sensations as they come, how can I love myself more? What is this sensation trying to say? When did I feel like this before? What did I need in that moment? Can I give it to myself now? And how can I love this even more? How can I hold myself in this experience? How can I love myself in this experience? Helps us to alchemize those things to find more wholeness.
Yeah, so again, allowing space. So allowing space for the shadows, the pain, the guilt, the blame, the hurt, the joy, everything that shows up, once we allow space for it and don't resist it, because big emotions are scary for us sometimes, and we find ways to avoid feeling them. But really, as you say, like the moment you allow space for it and you give that, whatever comes up, you give it the love that it needs, it really alchemizes and transmutes into a healed version of it.
Yeah, wholeness.
Yeah.
A deeper level of wholeness. When we have these experiences, they will create those new neural pathways. So when we're presented with, similar situations that we've been in the past, we may feel differently about them. So the idea is to be mindful of what that is and then create space, create the space to explore it. What is it trying to tell me? How can I, if a sensation seems negative, although no negative, it's just information, then how can I love it more? How can I embrace whatever that is, whatever that's trying to tell me? How can I find more wholeness through love for that? Sometimes it may even, the information that we receive, say if for me, actually when I'm an experience, when I was integrating it, I realized that, oh man, do you know what? Going into this environment, I don't like it. It's not working for me. And before, it was a subconscious thing. So I could go in and be fine and, not really think anything of it. But then after I found more wholeness, with myself, it presented itself as I would try to go into that same environment. It was like, no, it's not good for me. It's not good for my spirit. And so
it doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good. Yeah. And so that was, a sign for me to be like, okay, do you know what? I'm not going to do that anymore because it's not helpful for me.
It sounds like it really shows you more of the reality of the situation. And once you see it, as you said, you can't unsee it.
Which can also be a painful process.
Because it can be your partner.
It can be your partner. It can be your partner. It can be things that you love doing. For me, I loved to go to the gym so much. But then I tried going back into that environment. It just simply wasn't clicking anymore. So I found different ways to have, what I like, physical exercise, just like a different way to do that.
And also in relationship, like you can find different ways to interact. Like it doesn't mean like leave your partner but finding new ways to express yourself, to communicate, to interact with each other. I mean, in any, not just specifically a partner, in any area of your life where you find that you see a clear way that it's not working, finding a new way to relate to it doesn't necessarily mean eliminating it from your life, as you said, with physical activity, but finding a new way to incorporate it or approach it.
Definitely. And with that, because it's a change, there can be a grieving process of like, because for me, one thing that's come up is definitely the people I interact with. And so I used to feel, well, after certain experiences, it was hard for me to interact in the same way. And it was like a letting go process of things that no longer serve me. And I mean, that shows up in many different ways in our lives, but it was very pronounced with the medicines of like, do you know what? That type of relationship or way of relating to this person or these people I don't want it anymore. It's not helpful. It doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel authentic anymore. And so although I know that it's not good for me and it doesn't feel authentic and I want to let it go, it still can be like a sad process or a grieving process of letting go of things that no longer serve us. Even though they may not be good for us, it's still a change, a difference, and can feel sad. Like, as we transform and grow and shed our skin, it can, as we're letting go of those old parts, we're attached to things around us, and we're often attached to those old parts, and as we let them go, it can be sad. Just like you said with relationships, that can be, mirrored in relationships. We can know a relationship isn't good for us anymore, but it doesn't mean that the breaking apart and the learning how to live without them is any easier.
Right. 100%. I mean, I think that it can still be a very difficult and painful and sad process. And allowing space for that to be sad, even when you know it's the right thing, is also important, because we can so easily rush through it, or find ways to distract ourselves, and then we don't fully integrate.
Mm-hmm. And something else I found so important with integration is, although we're the only ones who can do our own alchemizing process, well, that's not exactly true, because through sacred union sexually, you can the other person's energy can actually help you alchemize, if it's like conscious making love, conscious sex. But still, even then, it's still our own process. It's still our own work that we're doing
To be conscious.
yeah, and to alchemize, and to we're the only ones who can heal ourselves, you could say. We're the only ones who can actually do the work on ourselves, but that doesn't mean it's a solo journey. It's quite the opposite, is to call on the people who can regulate our nervous system, who can hold us. Because actually I just had a therapy session with for my integration, specifically for integration. I realized, you know what, Anne, you're having a hard time integrating this. You're having a hard time processing my last experience with Changa. And so I called a therapist. She's my friend, and she works with psilocybin, so she has relationship to psychedelics and integration. And she held me, we talked, and then she was in a very calm, regulated state within her nervous system, and she held me for a while. And I was able to, and as we processed, and I talked about my experience and kind of the obstacles I was hitting with the integration, and just through talking, re-experiencing the sensations, because we got to feel it to heal it, re-experiencing the sensations while somebody held me when they were in their regulated nervous system, parasympathetic, it allowed me to entrain to hers through her. She was rubbing my back. She was, holding me, just, guiding me a little bit of like, keep feeling it, how can you love it more? And just through her vibration and me opening up to it, I was able to entrain to her vibration and integrate it. It was so beautiful. It was something that I kind of been trying to integrate on my own for about 3 months. And then I'm like, you know what? I got to reach out for help. And even me reaching out for help was part of the integration, because I can be very hyper independent. And so for me, the reaching out and saying, please help me, was part of my lesson with this specific experience with the Changa. And then, just having her hold me and training to her nervous system was a huge part of the integration process.
Beautiful. Is there anything else that you think should be mentioned?
Yeah, one thing is that I'm speaking from my experience. And so there are key elements that can be universal, but also that this is just what I've experienced in this world of things. So maybe not what I say isn't universal for everybody. There's lots of different ways to integrate. There's lots of different experiences and way people relate to the medicines. And then there's one other thing that I think is important to say. The universe will give you what you're ready for. So whether it's something deemed as beautiful or difficult, the universe is giving it to you because you're ready to receive that. And so not to say that it's like, yes, that felt good, thanks for giving it to me. Sometimes it can be like, wow, that's like, a big thing you just showed me. But it's showing it to you, whatever is shown to you because your spirit is capable of transmuting it. It's capable of alchemizing it to integrate it into your own experience. It may be a difficult process, or it may feel difficult, but ultimately the plants are guiding us towards home, towards spirit. And it gives you the load that you can handle. And I think one of my biggest things is just to not hesitate to reach out for help. I think that is just so important, is to not suffer alone. If it feels like suffering, is to reach out and say, hey, help me. I think it's just so important. Like one of the kind of a pivotal thing that I don't think is emphasized enough, because I see a lot on, all the spiritual pages on Instagram and Facebook. It's all like, you're a warrior, do it yourself. You're the only one. It's a solo journey, this type of thing. But really, it's all kind of lost if you're not in community. Our community are our mirrors. They're our support. Something I say to the students often is like, you look at the big redwood trees. They're so huge and tall. How do they get so big and tall without falling over? It's because there's other redwood trees around and that their roots are all connected. So if we want to get big and we want to get strong and tall and really live and like feel our fullness is through community, is through being
I love that. When your roots are connected, you can grow as tall, as wide, as bright as you want. But you have to have the connection to your own roots and to the roots of the community around you. I love that. I think that's a great note to end on. And thank you. Thank you for being so open and honest. I really appreciate you as a person, as a teacher, as a friend, and looking forward to our next conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much for inviting me into this with you. I love talking to you and exploring these things.
Now, after this time to nurture your mind and your spirit, we invite you to take a moment to consider others. A kind wish might come to mind. Know that what we learn becomes more valuable when we apply it and share it with others. So share this episode on Instagram stories, tag Yandara and I, or share with a loved one so that more people can benefit from it. Our hope is that the search will lead you home, to who you already are, to what was always there. We'll be back next week with more inspiration, honest conversation, and insight into the energetic world around us. Thank you for listening and watching.